Hi, I'm Chase Stanton. I'm the manager here at SCTN. Today I'm joined by Jeff Fordice, who is the Director of Public Works for the City of Saline under the Department of Public Works sector.
Right.
We're going to be talking a little bit about his background, the department in general, and some of the projects that you're working on, your department's working on right now. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Pretty good.
So to start off with, we could talk a little bit about your history with the department, how long you've been working for the city.
Okay. All right. I have been working for the city for a little over 10 years now. Came to the city in 2001 as the assistant city engineer and spent a little over 8 years in that department. And then in 2010, our longtime director of public works, George Danifel, retired. And we were looking at different ways to fill that position and decided that to kind of streamline operations a little bit, we'd combine my assistant city engineer position with the director of public works position. So suddenly ended up with 2 jobs. It was kind of interesting. So I've been in that position for almost 2 years now.
Great. And what was your background before you came to Saline?
I studied engineering, environmental engineering at Rutgers University, and worked for 8 years for 2 different private consulting engineering firms. And in those areas, I worked on some hazardous waste site cleanups and started transitioning into drinking water and sanitary sewer wastewater treatment projects.
Okay. What's the difference been like working in a public sector as opposed to a private sector?
For me, a lot of the projects have been very similar. The areas of responsibility are, pretty much the same. There's, for me, coming into the municipal environment, a lot more street-related things than I was doing in the private sector. But it fairly the same. Really, for me, the difference was different travel requirements. As a consulting engineer, you go wherever the work is, and as a city engineer, you work in the city.
Yeah.
So my commute got a lot shorter, and then my travel requirements were reduced quite a bit, and that was really what kind of drove the change from private to public work for me.
Yeah.
And one of the other real benefits is in the public sector in a small community like Saline, you're closer to your client. In the private industry, sometimes you're physically very removed from your client, and just different structural levels. Here, I live in Saline, I work in Saline, I work for the citizens of Saline, and it's most of the time very rewarding being close to the people that you're working for.
Yeah, definitely. In a smaller community, a lot more connection with what you're doing and whatnot. So your department has 14 members, correct?
Right.
If you want to just kind of go over how it's set up.
Well, there's myself as the director. I have an office manager, 3 foremen, and then 9 crew members. We've been kind of that size crew is a little bit smaller than we've had in the past. We had a retirement. We had a retirement from the Department of Public Works. We had a retirement at the rec center, and that position was filled by somebody from the Department of Public Works. And again, with the budget issues that we have, we're closely looking at what's the best size. How small can we go before we start getting into trouble. So we've done a little bit of internal rearrangement right now. We took one of our mechanics and put him on the crew. So now he's kind of as a standby mechanic.
Okay.
Well, so we're kind of getting 2 for 1 from that position. We're getting 2 for 1 from my position, and trying to streamline and get as much as we can out of as few people as possible.
Squeeze as much as you can out.
Yeah. That's the times we're in right now.
Yeah. So speaking of how you kind of cover 2 positions, what's your day-to-day like?
It's usually a pretty long day. The general hours of the Department of Public Works are our 7:30 to 3:30. That's the bulk of the time that the crew is there. But there's always after-hours events. If obviously it doesn't always snow between 7:30 and 3:30, so
Yeah.
we have call-ins to bring in whoever we need to take care of those kind of issues. Water main breaks. My day is typically longer than that, and then I have various evening meetings, city council meetings. I'm also the staff liaison to the Historic District Commission, so I have those meetings. I sometimes go to planning commission meetings, so it's generally 10-hour days.
Wow.
And then whatever happens after that, whenever the phone rings. So.
Great. And we should mention that your department recently moved to a new building.
2007, moved into the facility we're in now. Prior to that, we were in a converted industrial building that not only housed the Department of Public Works, but it was also the police station and the building and engineering department and a district court.
Wow.
There were a lot of things crammed into this rehashed building, and it was not a great building.
Yeah.
And so that's slowly each entity moved out of it. The court moved out. The police and building and engineering moved to the current city hall when that opened up in 2002 or 2003.
Yeah.
And then DPW was the last one to move out in 2007. So.
Great.
Yeah.
So for those of the public who aren't completely familiar with what the DPW covers, because it's a lot,
Yeah.
Could you just kind of go over a general list of what your department covers?
Okay. One of the most visible things we do is street maintenance. We fill potholes. We do pavement markings, crosswalks, the long, like the double yellow lines down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
We do the snow plowing in the winter, salting. We also take care of the water distribution system. It's a separate department that actually treats the drinking water, but then DPW takes care of all the water mains that bring it out to the houses, the fire hydrants, water meters, those items. And we work with the Treasurer's Department for water billing. We do the reading of the meters, and then the Treasurer's Department does the billing. We also take care of the sanitary sewer system. I think most people think of that as something that just happens automatically.
Yeah.
But there's actually a fair amount of maintenance to make sure that it continues to work. Every every sanitary sewer needs to be cleaned every year at a minimum. And then we have some other ones that are cleaned more frequently than that based on history of what we know and where the problem spots are.
Yeah.
We also maintain the storm sewer system. All the catch basins along the curb lines. Each of those has a little sump in the bottom that's designed to catch some of the heavier pollutants that roll off of the street. Each of those needs to be cleaned out once every 5 years, and we have I think there's about 3,000 catch basins.
Wow.
So that's an ongoing practice. And then the Public Works Department is also responsible for what I call the Phase 2 stormwater regulations. It's part of the Clean Water Act. Saline fell into those requirements about 8 years ago when the U.S. Census redrew the Ann Arbor urban area. So now that we are defined as being part of an urban area, these rules have come upon us. So we have to do a lot more thinking and planning in regards to what happens to the water that runs off of our streets and buildings. And some of the things we've done, some of the more visible things are 2 roadside rain gardens on Old Creek Drive. At those locations, they treat about 2 or 3 blocks worth of runoff. The gutter, instead of going into a catch basin, the water is directed into these vegetated areas and gets filtered. Some of the pollutants are actually taken up by the plants, and the water gets treated. And the cemetery, we do the burials there and install foundations for grave markers. We do the lawn maintenance. Right in the past, we'd actually city employees did the lawn maintenance there. Currently, we're contracting that with a lawn maintenance company.
Okay.
Trying to think of another broad area. Parks maintenance. We do.
Okay.
We take care of all the parks, the buildings, the play structures, the lawn areas, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of other things too.
Yeah. Kind of a lot of, I'd say maybe unseen things that
Yeah.
people don't think of, but need maintenance, need to be taken care of.
Right.
So we had mentioned that there was a few projects. You already touched on the stormwater with the
Mhm.
gardens, and you had mentioned that you maintain the streets. So there's some new equipment we're getting to take care of them.
Yeah. Part of the overall budget tightening that all communities have been going through lately. One of the impacts of that is we don't have as much money as we used to repave streets.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been really looking into ways to extend the life of the pavement as much as we can. One of the ways we've done that in the past is we use a fairly advanced pothole patching material. It's not just straight asphalt. It has a couple additives in it that help it bind better and last longer. We're looking at some various alternatives to repaving streets, different ways to kind of put, sort of similar to the way people will seal their driveways.
Okay.
There's versions of that available for streets, and,
Oh.
and some of them are, they're kind of difficult in an urban environment with curb and gutter.
Yeah.
We're studying ways to make that work better in an urban environment. But we're also buying some equipment that'll allow us to deal with deteriorated pavements in-house rather than hiring a contractor to do it, and deal with like small isolated deteriorated spots that in the past might force us to repave a whole section.
Okay.
Now it's kind of an extension of pothole patching, but a more
Yeah.
advanced and smooth professional paving job that we hope to do. So we should be taking delivery of that piece of equipment in the spring.
Great.
And start working on a bunch of different areas around the city, because there's certainly as a whole, Saline has really very good pavement condition on average compared to many communities around here.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
we definitely have some spots that need attention, and it's getting more difficult to take care of that the way we have in the past.
Just the nature of being in Michigan.
Yeah.
Another one of the things we had talked about before we started was LED streetlights that have been put in.
Yeah. We've been looking at a number of different ways to try to reduce our energy use and save money in that way. And an opportunity that came up a couple months ago was DTE DTE owns almost all the streetlights in Saline, and we pay them a fee to maintain and operate those lights for us. And they're under some regulations that are requiring them to replace one type of light fixture they have called a mercury vapor.
Okay.
And they wanted to do some demonstration projects on different ways to convert those to other technologies. So we were lucky enough to be selected, and DTE kicked in, I think it was $50,000, and then the city, we threw in about another $3,000 to expand things a little bit. And the project's not 100% complete, but most of it is complete. Took some of those very old mercury vapor fixtures and replaced them with new LED light heads. And the bulk of them are done. There's one strip that hasn't been completed yet, but they look pretty good. I'm excited about them. They use about 30% of the energy that the old fixtures
Wow.
did, and actually provide more light and a higher quality, more controlled light than the old fixtures.
That's great.
So those are, I'm personally excited about that one. And the ones that are in right now are on North and South Harris, Bennett Street, East and West Henry, and there's a few on Monroe Street, and then the south end of Old Creek will be done hopefully sometime this month.
Great.
So.
How old were the mercury vapor lights that they had replaced?
Um,
And that
they,
has to be fairly old.
yeah, they were probably around 40 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. Another one of the things we talked about is that some of the street signs might need replacing because of federal regulations.
Yeah, the Federal Highway Administration issues a document called the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices on roughly a 5-year cycle, and the one just before the most recent one included some new requirements for retroreflectivity of street signs. So the way it looks, we haven't completed our inventory yet to see where everything is, but just an eyeballing of them says that we're probably going to need to replace all of our speed limit, stop signs, any of the kind of signs you see along the side of the road, all of them over the next 5 years to meet this new standard.
It's a big undertaking.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one, and it's something that a lot of agencies, ours included, didn't really look at in the past. So it's kind of certainly a new challenge, a new thing to think about, and we'll be getting up to speed and taking care of that.
And could you just kind of go over a quick explanation of how the retroreflectivity works and what they're looking at when they want them replaced?
Retroreflectivity is it's a measure of how much light coming to a surface is reflected back towards that light source. So reflectivity, light will hit something and then bounce off at the opposite angle. Mm-hmm. Retroreflectivity, the light will hit it and actually bounce straight back.
Yeah.
So that's basically what makes signs visible at night.
Yeah.
Your headlights hit that sign, and then that light comes back right towards the source, and your eyes are close enough to the source that light, or that sign kind of lights up.
Yeah.
And driving around, you can definitely see differences.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll see an old speed limit sign with a new no parking sign underneath it, and you can really see a difference there. So it's that. The retroreflectivity is what makes the sign visible at night, and that's what the Federal Highway Administration is looking at. That obviously, if there's a need for a sign, you need to see it at night also. So
yeah, it's important.
Yeah. So that's what these new rules are geared towards, is making sure that nighttime visibility is maintained, and and it is a maintenance program, because you can install the most retroreflective sign in the world. But it loses that over time. The same way paint fades, the materials they use that provide this retroreflectivity, they wear out over time in the sunshine and in the weather. So you need a maintenance program to monitor them and make sure that you're maintaining that minimum level.
Great. Also have down here the non-motorized pathway project.
Yeah, the city has been working for a number of years on improving walkability, and one of the ways that we've done that is about 2 years ago, Mayor Driscoll identified a grant opportunity that would help us develop a non-motorized transportation plan. So we applied for that grant and received it, and hired a consultant to help us with that. So in 2009, we completed the non-motorized transportation plan. It was adopted by council, and it basically it has some broad guidelines and goals, but then it also has some very specific projects. There's a map in there of a trail network, and where we have identified that we should have bike paths or bike lanes. And then in 2010, we adopted an ordinance. It's called the Complete Streets Ordinance, and that sort of gives the non-motorized plan the rule of law.
Yeah.
So it's got a little more backing behind it, and that probably is also going to help us be eligible for some various different transportation funds. MDOT is looking at, they've got a couple different grants that run regularly, and they're looking at making if your community has a complete streets ordinance or resolution, that you get so many points for that towards that grant application. So
Yeah.
that should be helpful to us in the future. And it got us a little bit of statewide recognition. I think Saline was the only the second community to adopt
Wow.
an ordinance. And then so we spent 2011 gathering up some grants, and we had an opportunity to work with the Saline District Library. They were looking at, they have an existing like wood chip trail system
Yeah.
through the woods behind the library. And they were looking at expanding that, and kind of came to the city with some questions about site plan process and whether any approvals were needed for that. And the director there and I started talking about the project and about the non-motorized plan, and a little bit of arm twisting and cajoling, and got them to agree to kick in a very generous and sizable contribution to a full-scale non-motorized pathway.
Wow.
Which will be a paved 10-foot wide pathway that'll run from Maple, just south of the library, through the southern edge of the woods in the library, and then into Brecken Park.
Great.
And all the way over to Harris Street. So we have a county grant, we have a CARES grant, we've got the committed funds from the library, we've got some committed funds from the city, and we have about 80% of the design work done.
Wow.
And look to finish up that design work this winter and construct that sometime next year.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that'll be our first big chunk of the non-motorized plan.
Great. And so if all goes according to plan, when would that be opened?
Yes, sometime in 2012.
2012?
That's all I'm willing to commit to right now.
Fair enough. And so the last topic we were going to talk about is the Mill Pond project.
Yeah, the Mill Pond project, that's another grant-funded project. It's from the Clean Michigan Initiative. They're providing, I think it's a little over $100,000 right now. We started with $1 figure, and then as we went through design, found that the Boley Bridge, the existing Boley Bridge, was not strong enough to meet the standards for a pedestrian bridge. So we went back to the state and said, hey, you got any more money? And so they kicked in some more money, expanded our grant, and so we purchased a new bridge, and we've got a great design for stabilizing the area around the bridge. One of the real initiative for the project was that there'd been so much erosion along the stream banks that the foundation for the old bridge was in danger of collapsing down the road a little bit.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So once, like in the design process, the engineers looked at that bridge and determined it wasn't strong enough. So at that point, unfortunately, we had to close it, which I think was a fair inconvenience for the cross-country teams. I know that was part of their course down at Mill Pond,
Yeah.
and I think it probably interfered with some senior photos and various things.
Probably.
And so we started construction. We actually got into the construction phase in November, and since we started, we've had roughly 8 inches of rain, and it's really been a challenging project so far. So we're kind of, it hasn't been easy.
Yeah.
But it's a neat project, and I think when it's done, it's going to be a real highlight of the park. But we got a little ways to go with it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it will be neat, and I think the next batch of seniors will really enjoy having their photos taken there, and the cross country team will enjoy the new bridge.
Great. So given that the weather lightens up a little bit, will construction work on it be able to continue through the winter? Or?
Yeah. Actually, we're thinking that winter time construction is really the best time for this project because it's not supposed to rain, and it's the water levels are supposed to be down, and we've been very wrong on that so far. But
yeah, it's been a strange winter.
Yeah. So we are at this point we're going to kind of pause, let the holidays pass by, and then hit it again in January.
Great. And so that's all the topics we had to cover. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about your department or anything anyone should know?
You know, the department is here to serve the citizens of Saline. That's what we do. You know, we feel free to call us and you know, ask if you got any questions about what's going on. Give us a call, and if you see something that looks like it should be done and isn't being done, give us a call. You know, we really like it if you like something we did. Let us know that too.
Always good.
So, yeah, that's about it.
Great. Well, thank you for coming in again. For anyone who's watching, Jeff Fordice, the Director of Public Works. Thanks for watching.
This has been an SCTN production.